Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to share our greatest insights on staying ahead of the application game geared towards students who are in their junior year of high school. So my name is Andrea Satariano. I'm the Director of College Counseling at ESM, and I'm joined today with my amazing colleague, Rielly. I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rielly. I'm a college coach with ESM. Super excited to be sharing some info with you today.
All right, so let's just jump in and get started. So we thought we'd start with a little humor, right? There comes a moment when every parent realizes the college process is looming, whether it's 6 months from now or 2 years from now. And we are here to help relieve some of that stress by giving you some very important tips and pointers to minimize your worries and help plot out a very clearly defined plan to hopefully keep everyone on a timely path. So here we go. First, what's the secret, right, to staying ahead? And really, the secret is organization, right? And some teenagers are amazing at this and others not so much. So communication is key. We find that open communication around the process between parents and students really lowers the stress level. I think sometimes this is a challenge. Parents have hopes and dreams, and your children may have other ideas, and there could be disagreements. But trying to remain open to all the options, that's really the goal, right? To have your child have options in the end. Try to be on the same page as best you can, or compromise on a school or two off of each of your lists. Sometimes just makes the conversations around the dinner table or in the car ride coming and going from events a little easier to have. But one key thing to stay in communication about and find some agreement around is the strategy of college applications, because there's so much emphasis on the early application process, applying early in November of senior year. There are plans called early action, which is a non-binding application process, as well as early decision, which is a binding application process, meaning if you apply to a college who offers early decision, and they admit you, you are enrolling at that school and you're withdrawing all other applications. So it's a very big commitment, and we want to make sure that you've thought about it very carefully and you as a family have an idea of whether that's a viable path for your child to take. Staying in communication with your school's counselor is, of course, very important. They are the ones who will gather and submit your school documents on your behalf. So, the students are responsible for their pieces, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but the school actually has quite an important role to play. And so making sure that the school counselor, if there's a specific college counselor, is aware of the plan and the timing, those are keys to success for sure. Organization, as I mentioned, probably the number one important pieces. Whether you are a spreadsheet person or not, I am not. I am a calendar, post-it note person. But whatever it is you need to do for yourself and to help your child stay organized, find that method and stick to it. Due dates are usually very clearly posted on admissions websites, but keep in mind you need to potentially send ACT or SAT scores prior to the application deadline. There might be supplemental essays that are required after the student submits. Apologies, I hit a button. After the student submits, which might have an additional deadline. There are also frequently different deadlines regarding merit scholarships and potentially portfolios, whether that's fine or performing arts. So a lot of moving pieces are potentially on your plate. So find a system that really helps you stay organized in a very clear manner. Now, this is probably more on the student's part than the parent's part, but dedication. To do this process well and with as little stress as possible, the student really has to own the process. And so they need to budget time, right? Yes, we want them to study hard. We want them to do their sports and their clubs, and we want them to have some fun. But there's a lot to do in this process, and they really need to be committed to creating a schedule and sticking to that schedule. My favorite recommendation is to make a weekly appointment in their calendar on their phone. on the bathroom mirror, on the refrigerator, somewhere where there's a set time, 30 minutes to an hour once a week, where you all are talking about or working on some aspect between now and next November when those applications will be due. Okay. So the basic application content, which for those of you who may not be familiar, maybe you've not had an older child go through this process, but the academic record, of course, is probably the first and foremost piece of anyone's application, which would include the student's transcript from their high school. Testing, which, as you probably know, has been sort of a hot button issue off and on through the years, but during the pandemic, every college went test optional. But now we are seeing slowly colleges returning to requesting or requiring testing. So that component is now a little more prominent piece for more colleges than perhaps even just 1 year ago. Of course, the students' activities in and out of school, which we'll talk a little bit more in just a moment, and the students' writing in terms of their essays. And there are several different types of essays, which we will also cover. Now, other elements involved in this sort of process between right now in junior year to application time is the college list. Do you have an initial research list right now? If not, that's something you could put as a priority to start working on. And where do you begin with that, right? There are many search engines online, which you can plug in some data and it spits out ideas, places like College Board's Big Future or potentially niche.com. There are plenty out there. And it's just a helpful way to get some ideas to get that process going. The reason why it's good to start initial research now is so by the winter, you can be broadening and then narrowing the list. So in the spring, you have a pretty good idea of maybe the top 10 or 15 or 20 schools that your child will be applying to. So they have the summer to really work on all of the essays. Of course, the essays. Rielly,
Andrea,
yes, jump in.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in quick about school list and school research. So, oftentimes you can go to the school website and find lots of, really wonderful information right there on the school website. But keep in mind that is kind of going to be the prettiest picture, the marketing tactic for the school. So, keeping in mind some of those other resources where you get more of the student perspective, kind of the lived experience on campus is a really good place to start as a student kind of trying to find your fit. So just wanted to add that in.
Oh, great point. Anytime you can do virtual tours or visits, but visit in person, putting your feet on a campus is so helpful. And yes, colleges don't expect families to fly all over the country and do 50 of these, but if it's something you're able to do, it's immensely helpful. So thank you for that, Rielly. So school list, narrative essays, again, the personal statement, which is the Common App Big Essay, has a maximum of 650 words. But then there are also supplemental essays, which are smaller, usually more direct, the individual colleges select those prompts. And they're typically about 250 to 300 or so words. Some colleges have no supplemental essays. Some have 1 or 2. Some have up to 5. So again, keep this in mind of budgeting time. The number of essays a student is going to be writing, it takes up a lot more time than they tend to think is it's going to take. And of course, the application itself, students should, at least right now, they can go online and create their Common App account. Even though we're in an application season for seniors, the Common App is open and ready for grade 11 students. And it's a fairly user-friendly process. So have your child jump on and create an account, and they can start filling out some of the basic information. Again, a time saver as you're looking ahead. So they're not working on this in the summer as well. So things to think about now, of course, academics. How are your juniors doing? Are there areas that they can firm up before the end of the semester? Do they need a little sort of tutoring prep in a particular area to get that B up to the A? Now's the time to really do an honest evaluation of where the student is in their courses. The junior year grades are the last full year of academic information a college is going to have when the student applies early in November of senior year. Testing, again, right now, if you don't have a testing plan, if you don't know yet, start today. Start thinking about the SAT or the ACT. No college needs both. That the old myth of one is preferred over the other, not true at all. Colleges do not care which format. They just want the student to provide the best possible test score they can. Activities, again, in and out of school, which Rielly's going to talk about in just a moment here.
Yeah.
So as we said in academics, of course, do as well as you can. Kids should talk to their teachers, go to extra help sessions, and really, really seriously think about a peer tutor or getting some outside support if necessary. This year, grade 11 students will be asking junior year teachers to write their college recommendations for them. Normally, they ask a core academic subject teacher, which would mean math, science, English, history, or social science, and or the languages. But there are many reasons why students ask faculty members outside of those categories. Mm-hmm. A good place to turn is your school's counselor if your child has any questions about who they might ask. Yeah. Rielly, do you have a thought on that? Yes.
I would say here too, I think there's a lot of talk about choosing the correct subject areas or, making sure you have a math and science, teacher as well as a humanities teacher. And my advice for you here is really to focus on teachers who like you, ideally, who know you best, and, have maybe witnessed you in context in your school environment. So maybe you helped a classmate, maybe you've shown initiative in that class, maybe you've overcome obstacles. Not necessarily, doesn't necessarily need to be an A grade to ask that teacher. They just really want to be able to speak on, your energy and your vibe in the classroom.
Absolutely. The teacher recommendation, the purpose of it is to give the college some insight as to who the applicant is in the classroom. Do they participate in discussions? Are they a collaborator? Are they a good lab partner? The teacher recommendation the job is not to talk about the student as an overall right candidate. That's the school counselor's job to give that context. So I have found that looking at academic comments, if your school provides those at interims or quarter grades, review some of those, and that might give you some insight as to a teacher who might know your child really well, that your child might not have thought of. So, all right. Now, testing, as I mentioned before, this has sort of gone back and forth in terms of availability and importance, but we have some timeline guidance on this in our estimation. It should really probably be a goal to try and finish having 2 tests, ACT or SAT, by the summer of junior year, which could even mean June or July. The testing companies now have exam dates in both June and July. However, that's a goal, right? So depending on your child's math course, they may not be as ready, right, for some test prep and some practicing. So perhaps finishing junior year before you really get started on testing might be the best course of action for your child. There are plenty of test dates right before the senior year and in the fall of senior year. But again, if you can manage it, 1 or 2 tests between now and the end of the year would be ideal. If your high school gave the PSAT, which most juniors sit for, those scores are probably out right now. And this may give you some insight as to whether or not the SAT is a good test type for you. It might also, if you're a great standardized test taker, it might also give you information about the program called National Merit. And this is really just a designation if your test score is within a certain range within your state. There's a whole formula to figure out by state who National Merit semifinalists are. It just is a designation on the application that your child would include in the honors section. Again, check with your school's college office or school counseling office to find out more details about that. ACT or SAT, as Rielly and I said before, there's no need to practice for both, right? Choose one, figure out which test format is best, and stick with that one format. So maybe your child takes a practice test of each one. Maybe they use the PSAT as some insight for the SAT, and they just take a section or two of a practice ACT. Either way, they should probably have an immediate feeling about which format is better for them, and then plan to schedule some dates still this year if that's possible. Our test prep strategy recommendation is often for students to do the summer between 10th and 11th grade, but that's certainly not everybody. We both have juniors right now doing test prep. We are testing for later this winter and spring. So don't feel like you're behind. That's just because that's the typical recommendation. We have lots of students test prepping at all different times of the year. Now, if your child has testing accommodations or accommodations at your school, extended time, for example, these are not automatically guaranteed when your child takes the SAT or ACT. So you will need to partner with your school's office, a counseling office. There are forms they need to submit in conjunction with you that will get the accommodations approved by the testing company. So please reach out to your school's office and ask those questions if your child receives accommodations at school. It's not an automatic guarantee that the testing companies will also provide those same accommodations. All right. So Rielly, how about you jump in and help me with activities?
Yes, I love to talk about activities and writing, kind of the more qualitative pieces of the application where, of course, testing and the quantitative kind of grades are an important kind of cornerstone for the application, but this is really where, admission officers really start to understand the student kind of as a person and as a what they're going to bring to the college campus. And so I really like to talk about activities. So first we start with activities kind of in school. So how have you made your community better in that school environment? It can look like leadership. It can look like initiative. It can look like academic curiosity, kind of impact in the school. But I really like to drive home here that students don't necessarily need to be, the captain or the president of all these clubs. It can kind of be subtler, impactful things in the school community as well. So maybe they lead a fundraiser for a cause that they care about. Maybe they mentor a younger player on their athletic team, or maybe they just impact the school community in a different way. And I think a really good way to start thinking about a student's impact is kind of this 5 adjectives exercise, brainstorming exercise that we have here. So students can choose 5 words to describe themselves. It's often difficult for 17, 18-year-olds to start writing about themselves, to start thinking about themselves and how they, navigate their spaces. So this is a way to kind of start to understand what they bring to their campus space or to their school space. And have them describe a moment in the last 2 years where they've demonstrated that attribute or a space that they've seen that coming forward. It just helps them kind of get started to think about the narrative of the activities that they do in school and how to kind of start writing essays about that as well. So it's a good place to start. I don't know if you had anything to add there, Andrea.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Rielly. Teenagers, I've been doing this a very long time, and teenagers, even the best students in English who can write the most amazing papers, they tend to struggle with college essays because it's not the normal type of writing. And so doing little practices, warming them up to this sort of reflective writing is really, really helpful. Okay, outside of school.
Yeah. So you have your school activities, you have your clubs, you have your things that are connected to your school. But another big piece of the puzzle is kind of how you spend your time outside of school. And that's not limited to, just academic type of activities or research or things like that. This can be, just community based. How have you impacted the various communities that you belong to? And I want to be clear, community can mean a lot of different things, right? It can be a school community, which we kind of already talked about. It could be a family community. Maybe your student helps do the dishes every night or helps buy groceries, takes care of siblings, things like that. And then it could also be, a larger town or city community. Maybe they help make decisions on the, student council for the city or something like that. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they do some kind of community service otherwise. And so I think in this case, I really like to think about impact again. It's a huge word that admission officers think about all the time. how has a student or how can they impact the spaces that they belong to? And I really like to drive home the other big word here is authenticity. I think so often when students are thinking of activities that they might want to do, they're asking the question like, what will this look like on my college application? Or what are colleges looking for? Or what are admission officers looking for? But the truth is admission officers want to find what's truly meaningful to the student. And they want to see that authenticity kind of represented in the application file. So there's really no magic list of activities. There's no right or wrong activity. There's no magic formula. It really is what's meaningful to the student and how, what motivates them to create a difference or have an impact in their various spaces.
Yep. So true, Rielly. And I like to always include, which we have on here, don't overlook employment. Boy, you can learn a lot of life skills when you are working at a fast food restaurant or in retail. And, dedicated church involvement. That's a wonderful, authentic, great thing to the student and their family and involved in their churches and temples. So don't overlook those things either.
Yeah.
Okay. So college list. Our recommendation, I mean, there's lots of, you can read a million links out there on how to make a college list, but I have always found that finding the best fit for a student and their learning environment and their learning style is a far better process than finding the best name. Any of us can Google, top 50 colleges with business majors, right? Great, easy enough to come up with. But depending on the college, the size, the academic competitive nature, how easy it is to get into a major, what GPA you need, the learning style and environment may not be a perfect fit for your individual child. And so they won't feel successful if they aren't in a place that really supports their style of learning. And that's true for their social life as well, right? Happier students are better students. And so taking some time in that self-reflection and really thinking about what are the key factors that are important to my child, how they learn, will they engage with faculty? What will they do if their freshman biology class has 400 students in it when they come from a very small high school? Those are things to really, really keep in mind. But our best advice is building a balance list. We want students to have what we call reach schools, highly selective, where the students, GPA and test scores might be in the middle or bottom middle of a college's middle 50%, right, of test score ranges and GPAs for admitted students. Having some good match where the students solidly in the mix at those schools, and having a few likely schools where the students' profile is a little above, right, the middle 50%. Those often come with the most admits and often with the most scholarship offers are from those likely schools. And I've had families every year get into a likely or good match school with a very generous offer and choose that over one of the students' reach schools on the list. So just a few things to think about in when you're sitting down and actually creating, right, your list of schools.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just wanted to add that list can take a lot of different iterations and might evolve over time as you learn more about different colleges and how they, how much variation there truly is in a college campus and college experience. And I'm sorry if I cut off your thought, Andrea, but I just think that something that I find with my students is they really don't realize just how different and how vast the opportunities are, especially like in US colleges. If you think about, size, you could have 30,000 undergrads at a school, or you could have 1,500 at a school. And obviously that's a really different feel, a really different atmosphere. And something as simple as kind of location and weather, it sounds kind of, obvious, but that can really impact a student's experience. College on the East Coast can get pretty chilly in those winter months, so do you see yourself sledding with friends, or you see yourself swimming in the lake with friends, that kind of thing. So and I just can't stress enough the kind of college fit piece, fit over name. because this is, increasingly the undergrad experience is a chance to really explore and learn about yourself. It's often students' first time away from home. So it's not just an academic fit, it's a cultural fit. And I think, colleges come in all shapes, sizes, cultures, and everyone's personal criteria is a little bit different. So I think, casting kind of a wide net and when you first start researching and seeing a lot of different options, and then kind of narrowing that list down as you learn more about what the experience might be like is a good place to start.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And similarly to like location and weather, urban campuses versus, lovely little schools in the middle of nowhere. Those have very different social lives and things accessible to them, right? To the students. And you just have to make your own personal list and prioritize this and be ready to compromise. I will tell you, in case no one has told you this before, there is no one perfect college. It doesn't exist. So compromise will have to happen at some point in some way, shape, or form. And so thinking about what attributes really, really matter to you and your child, and then what are the deal breakers, right? What are those deal breakers? What I was about to say is, college admission reps typically visit high schools in the fall, which right now that season is sort of over. Colleges have sort of finished for this year, and sometimes juniors are not even invited to those visits. But next fall, if your high school has college reps who come to the high school and present their 20 or 30-minute presentation, your students should sign up for those. And you just get to meet an admission rep. You get to ask some questions. You get to hear their little pitch. And it just puts a face and a name together with the person who may very well be the first person to read the application file. So think ahead about that for next fall in case your high school offers that opportunity. So as I said before, there are lots of tools available out there, many of them free, some are even through your own school. So frequently high schools will have tools such as Naviance or Score or Maya Learning. These are paid for services by the school that the high school helps students create college lists and actually manage the application process. So something, again, if you haven't heard this yet from your school, something your child may stop in that office and ask. But there are some others out there, College Kickstart, a free version is Big Future from College Board, which I reference later. Your child just creates a College Board account and you can plug in information and it will generate a list that you can change the criteria over and over and over. There are lots of books out there, but one of our favorites is really the Fisk Guide to Colleges. And one of the reasons why it's our favorite is because it doesn't list every single college in the US, but it lists probably the most prominently applied to. And for those individual colleges, it lists overlapping schools. So if you're interested in Babson, it'll list 4 other schools that compare to Babson. If you are interested in UCLA, it will list 3 or 4 other schools similar to UCLA. So it just generates some ideas, sort of food for thought. So it's a great book and it's readily available. Okay, so I know it's hard to think about summer, but it's time to sort of think ahead about summer. Picking this spring, probably late spring, picking challenging classes for senior year, even though those grades are not likely to be part of the early application, the colleges will still see the course selection of senior year. So it is not a time to get what they call the senior slump, right? Don't slack off. Still follow through on your core academic subjects. I think that's a very important point. Rielly, would you agree, having read many applications?
100%. There's something they talk about is that upward trend in rigor very, very often on the kind of college side of things. They really expect that you'll challenge yourself and want to see that you have a really solid foundation and not that you've taken sort of, like you said, that slump before heading into college. They want to see you on an upward trajectory for sure. And rigor is something they talk about, very consistently. It's really important.
I agree. And a high school graduation requirements, right, that you obviously have to meet those, but those are often minimum requirements. Colleges like to see students with more than the minimum, and highly competitive applicants are almost always above the minimum level of expectation. So keep that in mind. But so many advanced classes is reasonable, right, for your trajectory. Really taking a good hard look this summer after you've taken a test or two, evaluate the results. Is there time and effort and energy to prep a little more and take one more, right? Maybe in the summer, maybe in the fall of senior year. We frequently will have kids take a little break after one or two tests, get into the summer, before school, do a little refreshing test prep, take that first test date in the fall, and it's the best one yet. So don't feel defeated if test number one doesn't go your way. We want you to map out a runway to really achieve your best possible results. And no, this is a term which you may not be familiar with, but most colleges will super score an ACT or ACT, which means for multiple test dates, they'll take the best individual sections and pull them together for one better overall score. Not every college, but most colleges do. So there's a benefit in taking the test a minimum of 2 times just because you could super score. This summer, right, plan ahead for your activities. Will you have a job this summer? Will you do a program on a college campus learning about a particular major? You will definitely want to be working on your Common App essay and college supplemental essays this coming up summer. So create the Common App account, put some colleges on your list. In August, that timeline turns over to you, junior class, to be seniors. And so you'll have lots more information about what essays you can be working on between now and then. This summer is also a good time to start to narrow the college list, sort of finalize, hone in on, again, what schools you'll be applying to early in the fall, knowing you could push some a little later into the January round, but you want to really prepare for what you have to work on between now and November 1, as an example. Okay, also in the summer, brainstorming the Common App essay. In the next slide, I think we're going to be talking a little bit more about the Common App essay and the timing of other essays. One little note, which I put on here, is an important note about essays is avoid too many cooks in the kitchen. Now, parents, I know you, I love you, we work with you, we understand you want the best for your child. But if there are 2 or 3 or 4 people trying to help your child with their essay, it's going to get confusing and stressful. So use a trusted English teacher, use an essay coach, use, whether it's you or your sister, the aunt, somebody, but workshopping it amongst multiple people is often to the detriment of the student. So just keep that in mind.
I was going to emphasize that same point, Andrea. Just, definitely good to have a proofreader or 2.
Yes.
But it's really important that student's voice is at the forefront of that essay, of all of the essays. And it's okay to brainstorm, bounce ideas off of each other, but I think that essay has to really start and end with the student perspective. And I just want to emphasize the brainstorming and outlining essays too. Like that should really, I always encourage students to kind of take some space and almost treat it as like a meditative process, like find yourself a little bit, like find your voice before you kind of sit down to just write about what you think the admission officer might want to hear, like really kind of connect with what you want to say first.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And, one of my favorite quotes from a college admissions rep is about the essays is, we can tell when a 17-year-old wrote it or when a 52-year-old in a Talbot sweater wrote it, right? Like there's a difference. There's just a difference, right? And so I think it's true. It's hard sometimes. I am a parent of a junior, by the way. So it's hard to sort of let go of some of these things, but admissions reps want to hear the 17-year-old voice. They want that. It doesn't have to be perfectly scripted, the most polished and professional thing. It needs to be in your child's voice. And that actually matters as much as grammar, right? Almost. And then, yes, of course, it needs to be punctuated appropriately, but don't overwork the essay because college reps can tell. They can see right through that. All right. So brainstorming and drafting. Time management, again, we talked about this earlier. It's so key to making this process run smoothly for all of you. So a couple key dates. and I know it's a little early to be thinking about this, but the Common Application usually releases their essay prompts for the next class in February. So this February-ish, the Common App will likely publish what the Common App essays will be for your child for senior year. The Common App rolls over, so if they create their Common App account now, it will roll over to them being a senior on August 1st. Okay, so we have February now, August 1st. August 1st is when the colleges begin populating the Common App with their own personal supplemental essays. So they can't even work on those until typically August 1st or 2nd. So that means they have between February and July to be thinking about brainstorming, workshopping, drafting that Common App essay. They want that in a really, really strong state. Doesn't have to be perfectly finished, but it should be pretty close before August 1st. Because on August 1st, they're going to find out how many additional essays they have to write through the months of August, September, and October. Because November 1 will sneak up on all of us. So it's important to get the big things out of the way with enough time and space that you can do them thoughtfully. This will include some other things, such as perhaps even an activity resume. Do those things between now and the summer, because the summer and fall will be book solid, right? Do you agree, Rielly?
Definitely. And I just wanted to clarify too. So the personal statement or the Common App is an essay, the 650-word essay that will go to every school that you apply to with the Common App. And the supplementals that colleges release on August 1st are much more specific to those schools. They ask questions that they really need to know to assess fit for their school. And so, there's a difference there. That's why we want to make sure that personal statement is really solid and ready to go before all those other essays kind of start to hit. So just wanted to clarify the difference there.
No, thank you. That's super helpful. And, earlier when I said, make a spreadsheet or a calendar, whatever works for you, things to keep in mind between sort of February, March, and the end of the year, the school year, right? The students will have final exams. They will have AP exams in May. They'll have graduations. You may have, family trips, things over spring break. A lot of time gets sucked up that you aren't necessarily thinking about. So really today, look ahead at the school calendar and map out some of these, even if they're tentative deadlines, right? I always tell students, pick a date earlier than you think, and then that gives you some buffer, some wiggle room, but literally circle things on the calendar and say, brainstorm Common App by this date. It just helps you and your child visualize it, and really try to stick to a calendar. Yes.
I'll say too, sometimes having kind of an end date for things is just as important as kind of a due date, because kids will rework their personal statement over and over and over again. And there needs to be a point where you're like, I'm done at this point. I'm not looking at it anymore, so I can move on to the next task. So I think breaking things into chunks with clear beginnings and endings is important.
I think that's great. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So we probably touched on this a little bit, but the objective of the essay, right, is thesis driven. It's not a retelling of the resume. It's not a retelling, right, of the activities. They want to say, this is who I am. This is how I show up. It's their voice. And so, you'll hear a lot about topics that you should avoid, politics, other things like that. I've always said that no topic is really off limits as long as it's addressed appropriately. So some things you might consider is, my greatest achievement was being the yearbook editor, which, by the way, I'm a yearbook editor, so I'm using this as myself. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of yearbook editors out there, right? And so what can you say about that position and that role that is unique to you and your own situation? So it's really the anecdotal information in that, right, topic, not just being the editor means I organize and manage and lead. That's true of anyone in that role. So what's specifically, right, about the applicant in that position is meaningful, an obstacle they overcame, a breakthrough they made, something like that only they can tell, right? An aspect of it that truly belongs just to them.
Yeah, definitely just want to stress, every topic is in play, as long as it's really about how you do it, not what you write about. I've seen really, really strong essays about something that seems, mundane, but it's like you said, Andrea, that voice or that lesson learned or that motivation or the impact an experience has had on a student, that really is what, an admission officer is going to come away with. And again, we have the activities chart in the application where you get to describe your roles in your activities. So I would definitely avoid recounting accomplishments or grades or other information that can be found on different pieces of the application. This is really the chance to speak directly to whoever's reading your application, to tell a story, to tell your story, and to, be creative and be fun with it. I think this is kind of a break in, just the listing of accomplishments in the resume style things. We want to understand, your beliefs, your motivations, kind of your background. And so definitely one thing I'd recommend avoiding is kind of that resume listing style for sure.
Yep, absolutely. So I know we've mentioned the Common App. The Common App, if you aren't familiar, is basically a platform that many, many, many colleges in the US subscribe to. It means the student only fills out the basic personal data, information once, and it can get submitted to multiple places. So as Rielly said earlier, the Common App essay, the personal statement, is part of that Common App. So it would go to any college who accepts the Common Application. So to complete it, right, you and your child need, some basic information, an unofficial copy of their transcript, or maybe access to the grade book online if your school does that. Parents, you can really be helpful with a list of academic awards or honors. Kids tend to forget what happened in ninth grade. It's so funny to me, like they win something and they don't have any memory of that. Also, lists of activities outside of school, as we talked about. Having your test score results handy, because there's a place in the Common App to enter that if you are applying with test scores. And parents and legal guardian information. I mean, they ask some really interesting stuff that kids, they don't know what year you graduated college. They don't know what your job title is. So things like this will save you a large number of texts. So if you can help them get organized around this, I know they will appreciate it later. As I said, they can create their Common App account now. I would recommend they do that. Once the basic questions are answered, they can add actually some colleges to their Common App account. It doesn't mean they're applying to them. It doesn't mean they have to do anything in particular, but they can see the specific college information about that college in their Common App account and what they're going to require. Now, keep in mind, this is still on this year's seniors. So they're adding information. The dates and deadlines and things will not be for your child's graduation year. That will all update after August 1 when it rolls over to the class of 2026. Now, your child may have a need to, or may have a place to invite others. So this is a very good question for your school's counseling office. If your high school counselor is going to submit the teacher recommendations, your child doesn't need to invite the teachers in the Common App. But if your school doesn't submit them, then they will need to invite teachers through the Common App to submit their teacher recommendations. You can also invite a parent or trusted adult to be an advisor, where they can view the Common App, but they can't make any edits or changes. So this is sometimes helpful for a counselor or a parent or a trusted adult, so they can review, sort of proofread everything right before the student actually submits it. So just something to keep in mind. So some helpful tips, right? I said, give yourself time, make a schedule, and stick to it. Rielly, number 2 is you.
Yeah, but authenticity is always my thing. I think it really is huge, not just in the application process, but even like right now, authentically follow your interests, your passions, and then bring that to the application. It'll automatically sort of transfer once you navigate life that way. So keep throwing yourself into things that interest you, take classes that interest you, be authentic throughout the process.
I love it. Now, my next favorite, don't rely on spell check. So things can be spelled correctly, but it is the wrong use of the word. So please, 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 your child will have read this 50,000 times. Errors will go right past their eyeballs. So an English teacher, a trusted adult, someone, at least one other person should put fresh eyes on the essays before they're actually uploaded into the Common App and submitted. Spell check does not catch everything.
Yeah.
Rielly, number 4.
Yeah, really quick. I've found that reading things out loud, both as a writer of an essay or a proofreader of an essay, reading it out loud so you can really hear it and stop at each word is a really great tactic. Really
yes, and me too. I can't believe I forgot that. That's my favorite bit of advice is read it out loud to someone else or have someone read it to you. You hear that your brain just works differently. You hear things differently. Yes, so excellent. Oh, I'm so glad you thought of that because that's one of my favorites. Okay, review each college's requirements. Again, you can see this information in the college list in Common App. You can, of course, go to the college's website to double, triple check yourself. But there are many differences between colleges and their expectations and requirements. So please, again, make a chart, keep track somehow of what they require and when they require it. One of the trickiest things right now for students is self-reporting academic records or self-reporting test scores, whether that's done in the Common App, which there's a place for that, whether it's done in the college's application portal. There are multiple steps and it can be very confusing. So this is an excellent way for a parent to really help their child keep on top of this and make sure you know all of the requirements. Rielly, do you want to sum up my last one for me?
Apply before the deadline. Yes, this is huge. There's so many moving parts. There's so many moving pieces. We really like to submit, a week before the deadline if you can, if not a couple days. I think it gives things time to kind of get through the system, have colleges receive all the different formulas. You can talk to the counselor and make sure everything's sent in. There's just a little bit of grace, a grace period. So I don't know if you had anything specific to add, but there's just so many moving parts. So get it in early if you can.
Yep. Build yourself a buffer. I always, with the students I work with, I usually circle like the last week of October. I pick a day and I circle it. And I tell the kids, this is when we're submitting. Plan on this day. Because it builds us a buffer. It builds us a buffer. And I'm telling you, when they submit the week before, they are walking through the halls feeling calm and confident while their peers are freaking out. So help your child by mapping out like these deadlines and timelines and try to support them the best you can to get things in ahead of time. It really does lower the temperature significantly. So this is the end. We hope you gained some great insight about how you can help your grade 11 student get through this process in an organized, timely manner. Feel free to reach out to ESM if you have follow-up questions. Rielly and I are always happy to follow up, and we have lots of counselors on hand if you want to learn more about us and what we do. But we wish you the best. Good luck. I promise everyone survives the process. You will make it through. So thanks for joining us. And again, reach out if we can be helpful. And Rielly, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Good luck. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay.
Take care.